Hi, everybody. We are members of Suppose and Eyes. We're a poetry workshop sponsored by the Kelly Writers House. Thank you, everyone who is here watching our reading, and thanks to Kelly Writers House for all the support that we get from them and for setting up this reading. So my name is Valerie Loveland, and I will be reading. Which of these islands in the Delaware River will I build my house on? Or drive my jet ski to, get hassled by the river police, those weird flashing lights in the waves that follow me around. River waves are the saddest. They try to pull away from the shore, but there's nowhere to go. The water pointed its long wavy finger towards the shore, towards bones, towards whole skeletons, but not to free the souls of the dead. It wanted to horrify us. I don't know which island will love me, but they have to really love me to make up for how much the water hates me. I need to know what each island was used for so I know what kind of ghosts I will be living with. Petty Island, used for duels. Reedy Island, a quarantine facility. Rat Island, there are no rats. Mud Island, protected Philadelphia. Artificial Island, nothing at all. Jet skis shoot out a tall arched stream like an elaborate watery tail. There aren't many animals here. I don't smell salt, but still smell the seaweed, algae, something rotting. I don't live here yet, and already I am melancholy on a jet ski. Skeletons stay wherever they're buried until we dig them up. Our bones take so long to break down. I wish we could train our skeletons to relay one last message when the rest of our bodies are gone. I warned you about the person I saw in the woods. I warned you about the person I became in the woods. I looked like I was in a clearing, but that was not the sun on my face. I was just flushed, vivid, luminous, vibrant, gleaming, florid, phosphorescent, lustrous. My famous last words did not end up famous, nor were they my last words. I came back from the dead and couldn't stop talking. I woke up from dying and couldn't stop laughing. I was somehow even worse than when I was alive because my mouth didn't have to move to talk anymore. He was mixed feelings. He was mixed predictions. He was a mixed bag, a mixed up bag, a bag of feelings. He was a sentence that ran backwards. He was the worst thing that ever happened to me. He was a ripped up confession that got ripped into even smaller pieces. He was a coin that drowned whoever put him in their purse. He was mourning jewelry. Time is a son of a bitch. It chokes and dies and chokes and dies. It makes every dish in the discontinued set shatter one at a time. When you finally find the set and buy it again, you find out you aren't allowed to eat from it anymore because the little green daisies around the edge are lead paint and have always been lead paint. It buries the bodies and digs them up again and digs them up again somehow, even though they weren't reburied. So how could they be dug up? Before, I didn't understand how cities could be built on top of each other. Now I know why cities nosedive like they are sinking to the bottom of a giant lake. You can't go backward past your own lifetime. You can't go back to the same place twice. You can only go back to when you know the lightning will strike. You can only go back to wreck things more. You can only go backwards to save your wife, but can never, never, ever actually save her. You can't warn yourself. You have to think of yourself philosophically as a twin in some ways, but as the same person in other ways. You can't tell someone you're a time travel unless they won't believe you. You can't get caught emerging from your time machine. You will never get her to come back. You can't let anyone in the past fall in love with you. You can't fall in love with anyone from any timeline except the one you came from, especially if that timeline doesn't exist anymore. You have to regret this. You have to make a list of what is worse, and it is all of it. You have to laugh when you see the old you, the one who doesn't know shit. You will need an alias. You can never hear someone say your actual name ever again. You will need clothes. You will need some object that hasn't been invented yet. You need to become a PhD level physics expert via sorrow. You have to ruin everything. You have to eat before you go because you won't be able to after you get there. You also have to cry ahead of time, ahead of the trip, because you can't cry once you get there. You have to become as broken as the timeline. You have to dig an enormous hole and look over the edge for so long before you jump in. This is my last poem. When I was a kid, I was a mini disaster, a mini pork chop, a mini microwave oven, a mini black and white TV. I was one of those mini refrigerators that people keep in dorm rooms. My brain was a regular sized tornado. My room looked exactly like my brain. I was a Cape May diamond, like the one I dug up out of my neighbor's yard. I found out they are quartz that the ocean tumbled. I was rejected from the Children's Ballet Theater production of The Nutcracker because I was too fat. I was Miss Piggy bending the bars of her prison cell while wearing elbow-length purple satin gloves. All summer, I watched reruns of 60s sitcoms and Laugh-In to look at the clothes. I was a body that had a brain floating not quite inside it. I was how a fluffy dog feels after a haircut. What happens to a flower after it is disconnected from its stem. I was a kid who could tell the future. I was not a kid who could prepare for the future. I was a 1959 encyclopedia. I was a memory of a fishing hook stuck in my thumb, but not the memory of how I got it out of my thumb. I was a porcelain figurine that fell over and broke and glued, and you can tell. I was a dress with cartoon teddy bears that repeated like polka dots, and one spilled cartoon jar of honey at my shoulder. I was a nightmare about stranger danger. I was a mayonnaise sandwich, and I was ketchup on everything. I was a Little Debbie snack cake, whichever was your favorite. Thanks, everyone.
I think I'm next. Hi, I'm Carol Bernstein. I'm the author of 2 books from Hanging Loose Press, Buried Alive, A To-Do List, and Familiar. I was recently included in the Moonstone Poetry Inc. reading and anthology, and I have work forthcoming in an anthology from Penn State University Press called Keystone Contemporary Poets on Pennsylvania. I'd like to start with a poem called Sleepaway. When I was about 11, I got to go to Girl Scout camp, and I only went one summer. And I assume that's because my mother couldn't afford it and must have gotten some kind of help that year, but I never really knew. And anyway, it was always special in my memory, partly because I couldn't go back. Sleepaway. Those were the first woods I ever saw. Then the tent and the other girls. The disgusting yellow fuzzy glob stuck to the tent flap that somebody flicked open, revealing wet pink eggs. The daddy long legs I learned to let walk on my hands, and the hike to a mansion's ruins where we camped, where I, barefoot, my glasses in their case, nearly tripped on a dead bat. 2 boulders in a clearing, sun-singed, where Mary Garvey and I reclined and discussed world peace, because it was a time before makeup or boys, when you could travel deeply into ideas and just be them, bodiless, forgetful. Grapes grew wild over a kind of archway near the counselor's tent, and I asked if they were real, and they were. When it was over, we dreamed or dozed on the bus through giant shadows of the turnpike until lights strobed across our eyelids, the Lincoln Tunnel's endless bathroomy tiles. Hey, we're in New York, said Mary's curly head, popping over the seat back. How could she be here? I thought, startled. Isn't she part of that place, of the forest? As if the tunnel had carried her through time, as I do now. In the dimness, her face like a sparkler. The next poem is kind of a little homage to the Jersey Shore and to the wonderful cheesy little game arcades that are on all the boardwalks. Arcade, boardwalk, night. Shreds of tickets are mashed in the gum-spotted carpet. Girls scream stomp the neon piano keys or try to escape the dinosaur tar pit. Parents show their baby the Wheel of Fortune. Two boys drive the twisty, impossible road together. It's silly and makes no sense. Friendly and fiendish creatures pop out, toads, sloths, in the strobing sky or creep along the ground. If you blow them up, you win. Bang, boop, whir, ding, ding. And who will get there first? And where is there? They yell and whoop. The black wheels are stickily rough from many hands. Their throats are coated with all the fried salt, sweet treats of the beach. Their shirts cling to their backs. Neither will admit defeat. Stuffed toys are suspended like market ducks. The only breeze comes from the black rectangle, the back door in its scruffy, peeling frame. They drive and explode all the creatures, and they blow each other up. Their hearts pound for their prize. Mini volleyball, plastic camera or spyglass, shark's tooth rattling in a tiny bottle. Portable hand warmer nobody needs right now. The black rectangle is open to the breeze. The seas murmur, and as the night gets later, a stronger breeze. And one boy spends his remaining points on a necklace for his sister because she is littler than him, forgoes the pirate coins, and this is a kind thing he has done for the ages. The black rectangle is nearly invisible. The black rectangle is not very noticeable, but it is there. Everyone rushes past it. The boy passes through. He goes down the 5 little steps, a chill on his neck. The ocean is enormous, but hidden from his view. It is some big creature or other, a giant animal that doesn't play the game. Above, the stars are velvet-backed necklaces, tangled, braided. He goes back to the warm smell of friends, the eternal cars, wearing the magic cloak of the arcade. Recently at my house, we had a bee or a wasp get caught inside the glass of our back door, and I wrote a poem about it. So I'm going to close with that poem. At the kitchen door. It was trapped between the 2 slid down overlapping storm panes, past the thin industrial brush edge where no creature was supposed to fit. It was something mean, a wasp or a honeybee, not a furry, bumbling thing. What if it got in? All that hot, sunny September morning, it crawled up in a zigzag or spun in a tight circle. Always up, casting a shadow bigger than itself on the kitchen floor at our feet. Try down, I thought. Please, go down, you could get out, flapping my hand uselessly near the glass. Sometimes it seemed to rest, and I hoped it was dead, but the cycle began again. It was in the process of covering every inch like a compass needle that kept swinging tremblingly, testing the pane in sections, strategic in hopes of an opening, stopping to regain strength for precise amounts of time. Behind the glass, the screen's grid appeared like fine graph paper. If it made any sound, we couldn't hear it. The whir of its thought. It had been hours. I wanted you to sneak outside and raise the bottom pane so it could fly out. Guillotined, it hung there, the yellow and black body framed in the giant white door like a small jewel or ornament. its anatomical sections on a wire like a drop earring, or a key to another world, like the diamond in the window I read as a child, or like an overcoat someone had left on a hook. I thought its shoulders were drooping, but it probably didn't have shoulders, or a soldier trying to die at attention, or a Halloween costume after Halloween with no one inside it anymore, or like its own body that it had shed. I tried to clean it out with a postcard mailing from Four Eyes Optical, but it just rocked it from side to side as if it were doing a dance. Finally, you brought the butter knife. So it lay in the yard among the season's potted annuals, some of which I hadn't done too well with either, and the broken, crumbling cement steps to nowhere that had been there forever, for women to reach a clothesline once. We were pretty sure there was a wasp nest deep inside where no human could reach it. Thank you.
I think I'm next. My name is George McDermott. I'm currently living in Florida. I used to live in Philadelphia, but I'm currently living in Florida, and the poems that I'm reading are all about Florida. You can take them as an invitation or as a warning. I think I'd prefer that you take them as a warning. First one is called Beachfront. The dredges are saving the beach again, pumping sand to the shore from the sea, sand that once was part of the beach, sand the storms will wash back out. The surging tides, the punishing surf, waves reshaping the waterline, hundreds of yards of coquina sand, weathered remains of pulverized shells, of Pleistocene lives, memorialized in sun-warmed sediment, reddish and barren. 1,000 years ago, the beach had the space to save itself, adjusting the coast to suit the currents, shifting the sand to match the weather. But now the beach is real estate, paved and covered with condos and bars, crowded with revelers, shallow as swamps, wading, unthinking through discolored tides, denying truths submerged in the flood, fractured beneath the pounding lies, belief or suspicion, known or imagined, the curse of inevitability, the residue of numberless lives, coarse and warm as ancient sands. The next one is called Category 5. It's divided in 4 sections, each of which has a subtitle. We have yet, my wife and I, to live through a Category 5, but we just lived through a Category 4, and we would prefer not to live through a Category 5. First section, the weight of the air. It crushes the tropical paradise, strips the walls from homes like dollhouses, turns the landscape into a shipwreck, and floods the derelict highways, leaving a silence broken by sobs, a darkness pierced by pulsing lights, manic reflections of red and blue to mark the grim caprice, the finger snap, the search for meaning in words that lose their meanings, the voices of fools and demagogues, the lists of magical places no longer enchanted, the rope the drowning dog struggles against, the cry from an attic unseen and suddenly silent. Live feed. As Portland watched the frenzied winds, the brutal waves, the bodies carried away, as Denver witnessed the women clutching each other for strength, as Pittsburgh wept for the lone homeless children huddled beneath the levees, the battlements, the cameras saw, the microphones listened, the satellites hummed. No matter how hard we tried to look away, we knew as much as the president, or more. They spared us nothing, spared us nothing, spared us. Calculus. Irrational numbers distort the news tonight. Acres of water, gallons of tears, questions like flawed ontologies for lives like chalkboard theorems washed away. Balancing sums, counting remainders, solving for quantifiable fears, counting what may be left to count, what mass remains in the aftermath, what actions apply, what numbers could be more precise than words or music for counting the pain. Sisyphus. Oh, and I should mention there are 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in here that are spoken by the Sisyphus character. I can't do voices, so I'll hope you can do it. Figure it out. The boulder isn't the point. He thinks the ants can handle rolling the boulder. 1,000 ants, 1,000,000 ants. We're there for you, he says. It's not his role to manage the burden of fractured roads and ruptured lives, the water, the power, the meds and food, the details of plans and workaday chores. That's what the ants are for. My people are on it 100%. He doesn't know what ought to be done, what has to be done, what can be done. He doesn't care to know which ants are doing what or when. They're doing a fantastic job. The boulder isn't the point. It matters only to ants. Our prayers are with you, he says. The next one, Parallax, subtitle, From Parkland to Tallahassee. These students drove 6.5 hours from their blood-soaked school to the Capitol to beg the bloodless officials for help, the sanctimonious guardians of grunting, wheezing privilege, the elders who brush children aside. These students were taught they hold the future. Their duty, they learned, is to shape the world. But then came the shots, the shouts, the screams, and then they were running away from their school, the air corrupted with misplaced odors, smoke and ozone, blood and vomit. They remember a trick from when they were little. By reaching out and squinting one eye, they can block the sun with the tip of a thumb or erase a looming obstacle. They're looking now at the Capitol buildings, raising their fists, extending their thumbs, blinking one eye and then the other. The buildings remain. They blink again and wonder if maybe they're the ones who disappear. And finally, Rackline. This is a pretty good summation of Florida, I think. Rackline. Things to step over, washed up things, discarded flowers coated with algae, jellyfish, eelgrass, lumps of tar floating in from an offshore spill. Things overlooked, half buried in sand, fragments of carapace, shards of brick, lucines and cockles, shattered sculptures, twisted lengths of mossy rope. Things passed over, abandoned, lost. Monuments fallen against each other, empty cans, fading melodies, blackened pages of silenced books, scraps of pastel, anonymous portraits, random snapshots of someone's children. That's it.
Okay, I believe I'm next. I'm not sure how to make the screen. Do I need to, you got me? Okay, so my name is Virginia Badler. Badler is my married name. I also go by the name on my birth certificate, which is Virginia Lee Renke. I have 2 poems here by 2 women who I love dearly. They're very important in my life, but perhaps these poems are more about their imperfections. My cousin Nancy, only 5 years older than me, significant in the light of childhood, now darkened as we are both in our 70s. I witness her dissolving mind, once quick and impressive. The nuns told her she should be in the gifted school, but she refused, wanting to stay in the same school as her brothers. I moan now like a glacier calving. Her reality has turned into an approximation of truth, names not remembered, facts misspoken. She asks me to buy her food that doesn't exist and questions why the casserole I baked is raw. I will stick close to my first memory of her from the 50s, when she was overcome with emotion listening to Elvis, resting her head with its thick tresses of black hair spread on the white marble table, her face nestled in the crook of her elbow. My next poem is Christine. Christine, my younger sister, sired by our father, we met at ages 40 and 44, and for years managed to have a mangled but acceptable relationship. She lived in Queens. I lived in the Philadelphia suburbs. Until last year, the day after Thanksgiving, when I told her she seemed depressed. Of course I am, she announced. I have breast cancer. The stem of her dark nipple had inverted. Her breast was like a white fruit ripening, streaked with bright red and purple. She mentioned it casually, as someone would report a change in hair color or nail polish. Initially, she said she couldn't face treatment and spent a week of nights in the movie theaters on Long Island, her cell phone muted. When she returned to Philadelphia, I took her to the hospital. The doctor said blood could no longer flow freely since the tumor had filled her breast. She then endured the gamut of treatment, chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, infusions, returning occasionally to her hoarder home to feed her 3 cats, where she just found my favorite, the gentle Maureen, dead on a pile of her dirty clothes. Thank you.
My name is Paige Menton, and I have a chapbook called 20 Miles to April by Dancing Girl Press. And I have a book called RIM, spelled W-R-I-M, and it is coming out in the spring with Spuyten Duyvil Press. And I'm going to read the beginning of that for this reading. So the RIM manuscript I wrote when my students were writing novels for National Novel Writing Month. So I wrote 50,000 word blocks for my NaNoWriMo text and then erased most of the words. And that was my plan at the outset, with the understanding that the narrative would emerge through the poems produced from this process. But another narrative grew as the draft progressed, or at least another way of telling the story grew, and I found myself preserving larger blocks of prose. The words in the manuscript are arranged where they fell on the page, and the titles for each section come from the text that was erased. So what I'm reading is really kind of like a long poem, but it has titles for the sections. In the middle of, what will hover on this day and allow me to hear misplaced labors to know wealth somewhere, a morning arrival of birds in search of a story. We will plant handshakes, passports, photographs, and wisps of hair, plant grocery lists and permission slips. What is the word for the part of each leaf that connects its stem to the branch, the part that gives in? The abscission zone. The bottom layer expands in the fall and breaks the weak walls of the top layer, and this is happening presently all around me, one leaf at a time, resigned by wind or force of rain, or magical realism. How our maps lead us, valences of cryptic insulation for stories running throughout our collective learning. How we recognize the bluebirds by the playful way they dart in circles from tree to ground. All these ounces of experience and the views from the window and the briefest glimpses backwards across a lifetime as rare as blackberry cobbler. How many abscission zones ruptured right in front of me today? How many sandhill cranes undetected overhead? I think like spokes in a wheel. When the grains obscure, seek the pattern. The upper or outer edge of an object, typically something circular or approximately circular, as in a china egg cup with a gold rim, or the verb to form or act as an outer edge or rim for, as in a huge lake rimmed by glaciers, or a limit or boundary, as in the outer rim of the solar system, or an encircling stain or deposit, such as a thick rim of suds, from the Old English rima, meaning a border or coast. Fringe, frame, margin, hem, periphery, skirt, verge, brink, crest, curb, cusp, lip, boundary, brim, compass, confines, circumference, and Old English serima for seashore or rim of the sea, when you cross out the extraneous and are left at the edge. To see over the edge, imagine a precipice or a valley, or simply continuing down the road when the steps feel like a continuation, but clouds obscure the view ahead, when the all clear may or may not pertain, when only the words connect you with the rim of the sea, when you are not ready to see a limit or boundary, but you feel you're exiting one all the same. Minutes passed along an axis bent. Even at the defining line, there is capillary action. Like the paper folded in half, suggests desperation and a physical force unnamed that implies a leap. Bend ideas like a funnel toward a center that contains seeds. Pat some soil on top and water. A kind of patience like ink, collating whispers and inhalations that shine toward the rim of exactly which resonance. Think about tomorrow as a barrel or pulpit or container ship. Like ribbon unfurling. That project of eternal locomotion, always trodden within the same concentric paths through Little Blue Stem, past shagbark hickory, past a knob-kneed bald cypress, past the row of utility towers, past the ponds, fading to be reclaimed. We depart knowing full well our inadequacy to cover the whole. Cut in ways uncharted like a dull knife. We rest at this edge of reverse or full speed ahead from lightning bugs to lights out, my extirpated generation. The junco returned today with a flock of chipping sparrows. The junco returned last year with a flock of chipping sparrows. Hidden in houses all over the world are lists like mine made by people like me who need to record when the indicator species leave and return, who need to document the patterns. To know our Goliath feet have not crushed the breath out of every living thing just yet. Sheet metal, swizzle stick, bubble wrap, cat litter, sit and spins, wonder twins. We are not at the edge of our knowledge. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Tolsis, and one of the great things about Zoom is that I can still participate in Suppose and I's, even though I've moved to California. The poems I'm going to read tonight are all about family members. And the first one is about my mother. And an interesting fact is that Jewish children are usually given their Hebrew names within about a week of the time they are born. And it stays with them through their life, and it has special mystical and spiritual significance. And there's a specific time when you can change someone's name, and that's what this poem is about. A Talmudic formula to fool death. So the angel of death wouldn't recognize her. We changed Mom's name. But I didn't want her to be someone else. I'd miss the lilt of her practiced laugh, light and easy as a wren's song. That sense of style pulled from a closet crammed with bargains, and the fading scent of L'air du Temps. Of course, her love, served in large helpings, seasoned with a dash of venom. Too late for miracles, her body crumbled, an unholy mess. Bruised IV sites, tattered flesh like frayed lace, cratering sinkholes. Until there was nothing ever to hold her together again. The next poem is about a great aunt, and I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I think people are different when they're in their own homes. It's sort of like having that home court advantage. Esther, part butterfly, part troll, my great aunt metamorphosed into insignificance the few times she left her home. Urologist, celebrations, funerals. Elusive as a monarch, she alighted on my arm as I guided her to my car under the high sun that day. Bunioned feet treading on her splotch of shadow, the smudge unable to stumble out of its own way. My daughter is an actress, and one of the advantages of having a daughter who acts is that I get to go to some interesting theater events, and our relationship changes over time, and that's what this poem is about. The start of the rainy season. A frail scrap of moon, remnant of another month's dwindle, limps along behind the clouds. Tonight, my daughter offers to drive. Feeble rain spatters the windshield. At the theater, she leads, steadying me on the awkward aisle stairs. We descend to our seats and a set covered in generations of sand and forgetfulness. Heading home, showers intensify, a promising start to the rainy season. At the top of the driveway, near the Joshua's trumpet vine, we swing our car doors open. After months of drought, I have to remind her, this is the smell of autumn rain. Pure, unadorned, immaculate. Moon breaks through the clouds, need wavering between us. About a year ago, we got a dog, and dogs are very much part of families. Dog walking. We hold small sacks of shit, swaying, green, biodegradable. We never wave. From across the street, I greet another dog walker, nod or mumble, good morning. She scoops up my drop consonants and serves a perfectly enunciated good morning. We carry around so much waste, we conserve what we can. This is purebred territory, but Lenny holds rescue status, a cute, flop-eared, lamb-like coat. Hardship and charm trump good breathing. He's in. Arguing face to face with standard poodles, Afghans, giant schnauzers, and the rest. They ignore him, but the snub goes over his head. So much hostility would be avoided by approaching difficult situations ass first and sniffing butts. Walking with a cane gives us status. First rights to the sidewalk. No one wants to jostle us, and they reroute accordingly. Westies hop into the gutter, blue heelers cross the street, ridgebacks lope down the center stripe, back hair bristling. One by one, we learn our places. I've written a handful of poems about my father, and this is the most recent one that I've written. Answers from the Afterlife. After the pre-dawn hospital call, I began evolving. Son, mourner, executor. Over the next months, I sorted piles of numbed confusion and wished for 3 phone calls, so my father, meticulous in every detail except his own death, could answer from the world to come. A risky miracle to ask from a man who squeezed his eyes shut before starting daily phone calls with his 3 sisters, each the same way. What's new? Nothing? Question. Where did you leave the safe deposit key? Answer. You didn't really need it, did you? Question. Why did you leave Mom's name on everything after she died? Answer. She was the only part of me I couldn't part with. Question. After all this time, I can't remember the 3rd question. Answer. What's new? Nothing? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to my fellow poets and audience members for being here tonight. My name is Mabel, and I've been part of Suppose and I's on and off for, I think, about 10 years now. I am a poet and a teacher from Philadelphia, and I will be reading 5 poems tonight. Thinking about the theme of tonight's reading, I have always loved celebrating the new year for, all of the cliched reasons of like a fresh start and the occasion to reflect on the past year. But then once it's passed, the reality of the rest of this horrible month of January sets in. And this is sort of what this first poem is about, that yearning for comfort and stillness in the midst of a long winter. This first poem was written in 2021 when it was still a brand new year. January. Rounding the corner at Palmer Cemetery, loveliest part of the 3-mile jog, I glanced past the black iron gate to see a man in a knit cap and surgical mask, slowly, thoughtfully taking down the Christmas ornaments, which have stayed past their welcome on a small bright fir tree. It's a late January afternoon when no onlooker stands to be cheered by feathered and felt baubles, now signaling the underside to anticipation and joy. Obsolescence of better times. Now here we are, days, darknesses underfoot, and still going. I run past and the man seems frozen in place, as I sometimes wish for things to be, the next hour to stretch farther away, for sleep to trickle on. The sun announces its brief solace onto Fishtown sidewalks and sills, as my mind busies itself on its own breathless tangents. Resistance to being, pounding conflicts into concrete, entreating the enigma of stillness with lungs ebb and flow, but peace stays elusive, squirreled away between the trees who know best how to be trees. And I, how only to heel toe it with dogged, mired diligence where pavement never runs out. Grace where space is offered beneath the heart's soft bruising. Worth where winter's end remains to be seen. The next poem I'm going to read is based on a beautiful bird we saw in the Everglades, and that feeling of mutual contemplation from different species that happen sometimes when you're in the midst of nature. And actually, one of Paige's poems, when she mentioned this bird, kind of struck me because this bird also appears in my poem. It's called Crane. Perched on a crooked limb under secrecy of a mangrove's leaf, a sandhill crane fans open, then shuts its wings. The movement a slow, blinking vision of sinew and length, an empress gathering her robes, purple-tinged feathers, suddenly, eternally still. It sees us seeing back through the dark, wet tunnel of primordial foliage, and elongated vowel within the muscle of Earth's mouth, of waiting, of drawing towards, a performance in limbo, stick legs gripping this tear in time, ready for dance or flight, that familiar suspension of our own artless bodies in the brace of fear or love. This next poem is called Saturday at the Wagner Institute for Science. If you've ever been there, it's a wonderful place, and this is about the first time that I was there. Walking curiously between mid-February sunbeams, I look at seashell swirl, walrus tusk, and taxidermy boar, North American birds, immortalized owl eye, and beavers' webbed back paws. Ancient corals ripple out towards Brontosaurus femur, assembled like pillar ruins of once important civilizations. Models of moles within their burrows, and spotted moth wings pinned in a field of inanimate flutter, as children with clipboards scavenge for answers down numbered aisles, past skeletal systems of our primate cousins. Shark's jaw and gemstones, starfish limbs of all astonishing fashion, how all life must be enumerated from the inside out, function of brain and blood, frame of bone, teeth, ocean calcification, and phantom fossils, laid out in turn in their second life, recollected for what their bodily essence was, or their temporary shape on earth. Variety, difference, death, in the ongoing transfiguration that is existence, which is the semblance of my own luminous body. The next poem I'm going to read is called Ghazal for Childhood. A ghazal is originally an Arabic verse form that was used widely by medieval Persian poets. The form consists of couplets, and each couplet ends on the same word or phrase, which is called the radif. And the traditional ghazal is much more intricate in terms of rhyme scheme, so this version is much more simplified. Ghazal for Childhood. During single-digit ages, I often found myself quiet at home, arranging time, faux ballet dancing with scarves across bedroom floor with mirrors. That time, Madonna's Vogue played, and I grooved with all my might, shaking limbs behind my parents' closed door, as if discovering beat for the first time. Escapist mornings inside long diatribes of Anne of Green Gables by the window, reimagining life on a prairie, a ship of talking animals in the Dust Bowl, across time and direction, bending through length of lines on a page, heading horizon-wise, wondering what my father could be feeling and thinking in his anger this time, as their small golden buttoned alarm clock would go off with a theme of Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, and it would remind me of possibly another time or place I might have lived to experience widely wheeling and grand gestures, the low swoop like a swan falling, arching from the sky in slow motion, time stop. The pale color of this page, in its absence of words, was an offering of something not yet spoken, plain and peaceful as a child writing alone with all the world's time. And this last poem is dedicated to my late dear friend, John, who I met while living in Madrid about 15 years ago now. I saw him for the last time last February in Spain, and he passed away the following month in March. This poem is called La Sierra. Snowless, it bends and flows like soft bodies that have lain down on the horizon over the tile roof houses of Guadarrama, where you will stay. Beyond the window, the mountains are there, even when darkness falls over our conversation in the hospital room, punctuated by our voices' resonance through the hallway, Scottish lilt twining with my full American laughter. What is friendship but something glittering, picked up and pocketed? Hours vanished by way of secrets unburdening over a cafés con leche, taken once with so much sugar, now sips black, unsweetened. Despite the rituals our homelands have cultivated, we have recognized some strange shine to each other. I tell you about the horse farm just down the block and the sun that has always been so good to us here. We continue to marvel at the trains and buses, how this life moves unfettered with gleam and precision. Several days later, the cactus flowers a brilliant orange against the backdrop of your window. The hills now hidden inside a gray sky. Meanwhile, you are smiling with limbs heavy, almost ready to take the next big leap. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carl Scheingold. I've had a life of moving back and forth between the academy and Jewish communal work. And when I felt I'd shot my wad in communal work, I started writing. And at the moment, I'm engaged in trying to figure out how my poetry can be incorporated into a memoir, or perhaps a memoir can be incorporated into the poetry. I'm not really sure. I'll just be reading one poem. It's titled The Eyes Have It. The pandemic had me walking every day, up and down the river, across town, passing countless faces covered with masks, except for their eyes. I am drawn to those eyes. They have a pull on me. I find all these eyes to be beautiful. Everyone seems beautiful when all I see is their eyes. I've learned to read eyes, to see a smile as reflected in the eyes, gradations of smiles, even just a twinkle. Eyes seem sincere. When a fully exposed face offers a smile, we see an upward shift of the mouth. It can feel phony, at least calculated, as if the brain with a reason in mind gave the mouth an instruction. I don't see eyes accepting such instruction. Eyes are powerful. To see and be seen, powerful, heartwarming. Someone averts their gaze, not heartwarming. Mind you, I don't miss living behind a mask. I appreciate seeing the whole of the other, for better and worse. I interrupt with a story. After the pandemic was in full bloom, I shifted salons. My hair was now being cut by a woman with whom I had no pre-COVID encounter, never not masked. When the city's mask wearing requirement was lifted, I went for a haircut. I asked her what the salon's current policy was. She said, masks are optional. I said, I'd like to take mine off. She said, fine. I asked whether she'd like to take hers off. She said, I would love to. So we saw each other's faces for the first time. It was a sweet moment, like the first time you hold hands on a date. Sweet and innocent. Is that what post-COVID can mean? Not naivete, not resistance to learning hard lessons, but also reclaiming a kind of innocence where we can find it. Thank you.
Okay, that is our last poet. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching us, and thank you, Kelly Writers House, and we'll see you next year.